All right, what's going on, boys and girls? I know it's been a while since I've done a reaction video. A lot of it just boils down to finding stuff that actually interests me on YouTube to actually react to. That's not the same typical dumb and stupid that I generically react to from, well, a whole lot bigger YouTubers than me, with, quite frankly, in my opinion, stupid takes. I watched this person's first video. I didn't react to it specifically because I wanted to see where they were going to go with this. So a couple of days ago, this particular person switched to Linux, and they're going about and giving their take on it. So I am intrigued to see where this goes. So I'll have swearing. That's just how I talk. Get over it. But don't expect a whole lot of ragging on and that kind of stuff, because this is somebody who's willingly switching to Linux and trying it and legitimately trying it. They're not putting on a facade of sticking a live USB in like some of the stupid chodes that I've actually reacted to and calling them trying Linux. This is somebody who's actually trying it, which props. As you can see, they're using Manjaro just from the bottom, you can tell. But let's get into this video and see what this person's actually working with, shall we?
Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of switching my gaming PC to Manjaro Linux. Previously, we downloaded Manjaro, created a live boot USB, and installed Linux. Today, we are looking to install drivers, enable the AUR, or Arch User Repository, download and install essential programs, set up my wireless Xbox One and controller dongle, and configure Steam to use a Proton compatibility layer for games. This should
So that's quite an extensive list. This is what, a 15-minute video. So I'm gonna try not to talk a whole lot, because I just want to see as a user what this person does. Again, from what I've seen, Linux is not their thing, so it's interesting to see where they actually go with this. I do find the choice of Manjaro concerning, but that's personal taste, so to each their own in that one. So let's see where homeboy here goes with this.
Should be a fairly short video because I've been finding that doing anything like downloading programs or installing drivers is actually incredibly easy to do on Linux. I do hope this video may be useful for someone who is thinking about switching over to Linux and wants to know how to install Nvidia drivers for their graphics card, or how to download and install programs, or how do I get my printer to work? Can I play games? Is there something similar to Microsoft Office I could install? I hope to answer some of these questions today. So first things first, I'm going to install the drivers for my graphics card. I have an Nvidia graphics card. So to start off with, go to Start, or technically called Application Launcher here in Linux, I guess. Go to System Settings. On the left side, go to Hardware Configuration. Then under the Installed category, select the checkbox you want to install. I am going to go with the most recent, the top one. To install this, just right mouse click and click Install. Click Yes, enter your password, and wait. We could have also used the auto install if we wanted to. There, complete. It is really quite that simple. At least for Manjaro Linux, I can't say for the other distros.
So as it relates to other distros, yes, it's actually fairly easy regardless of the distro. What version of the drivers you might get, that's another story, but generically the driver installation is about the same across the distros for the most part. I'm not a big RPM guy, so I can't really speak to NVIDIA installation of drivers on most RPM, Fedoras and SUSE and those kind of distros. I'm just not an RPM guy. And, again, Linux is all personal preference. But as far as Arch and Ubuntu based distros, it's about that easy.
Close this. If there are anything else, like your network adapter that you want to install, now would be the time to install it. You can also remove or reinstall if you're having issues. I'm just going to leave mine like this. Now, next, Let's enable the Arch user repository in the package manager. Simply open the package manager. It's called add or remove software. You can
So most people won't understand what a package manager is. The package manager, the best way and the simplest way for non-Linux users to understand what a package manager is think of it like your app store. Think of it like going to the app store on Mac OS or the Windows Store, etc. Every Linux flavor has a different name for it. Some call it Software Center, some call it App Center. In Manjaro's case, it's Add Remove, which is actually the actual app. It's called PAWMAC. There's a ton of different ways to go about this. As far as the GUI front end is not universal for across distros. So another one is Discover. If you're a KDE person, another one that you might find occasionally is like the Deep in Store. There's a ton of them. If you want to go really, really old school and kind of clunky for a new user, would be Synaptic. A little more powerful than the generic like PAWMAC and that kind of stuff, but it's also a lot to take in when you are looking to use it, but it's great for like filtering like broken packages and that kind of stuff. Personally, for me, I generically use Synaptic mostly on Debian based distros. That's just my flavor. To each their own. So just a caveat to that.
You can find it by going to start and typing in add or remove software. There it is at the top. Once your package manager is open, click on these three bars in the top right corner. Go to preference.
The three bars are what people call a hamburger menu. So if you ever find that term being used, the hamburger menu is the three bars that he's talking about.
Enter your password. At the top, go over to third party and then enable AUR support. Before we close this window, one thing I have seen suggested before online was refresh mirrors. So to refresh your mirrors, go to General, scroll down a little bit, and click Refresh Mirrors. Some other people suggest switching to a local mirror, so a local country to you, as well as refresh mirrors. I found that it works just fine on worldwide, but I did refresh my mirrors earlier. Just one thing that maybe if you're having issues, try that. Now, with the
So one thing I'm liking is that you're actually looking and trying to use the help tools, like the community, and as much as I hate using the term the man pages, to look for advice, look for help. It is a very big part of Linux, and it's not one that gets highlighted enough in the positive light. You always hear about the Linux community is toxic, blah blah blah. It's relative. Every community is toxic or has elements that are toxic. Some of them are just bigger, loud chodes than others. So we all have them. Most are not that way. So I do applaud your actual research and the stuff that you're doing. So I do applaud that.
The Arch user repository enabled, we can find pretty much any program we want that is not available in the official repository. Example of that would be, I believe, Spotify. Yeah, Spotify, AUR. I already have it installed, but another good example of the usefulness of the AUR, of the Arch user repository, is earlier I was trying to get my printer to work. When I went into my system settings, on the side I scrolled down to printers, and my Brother HL2270 printer, Linux could not find a driver for it. My HP printer worked fine, perfectly, didn't have to do anything, just
So you are correct as far as the HP, because HP does a lot of work with their printers to make sure they work on Linux, because servers. That's the short version. So most of the time when it comes to HP stuff, as far as the printers and whatnot, you really don't have a whole lot of fuss and muss to really deal with them. Brother, you would be correct as far as it's like Epson and a few of the other printer manufacturers. They have drivers, they just don't support the actual driver per se. Like they'll put out a driver here, figure it out, but like actual support, good luck. So you're not wrong there. So generically though, printing is out of all the stuff from the LTT videos, printing was the one thing that they were like, oh my god, it works. So but as far as you are, I'll let you finish your point before I have my own statements on that.
Worked out the box, but my brother couldn't find a driver for it and it refused to work. What I was able to do is actually go into the package manager, type in my printer. So I typed in brother, and then it's HL2270. I was actually able to find a driver for my printer through the package manager, download, install that, which it does automatically. So I downloaded this, and instantly, like, it just worked. With the package manager, you literally have access to pretty much any program you could ever need. LibreOffice, for example, a perfect replacement for someone looking for a program similar to Microsoft Office.
Okay, so for most general end users, LibreOffice is going to be more than enough for what they need. However, caveats are needed for application compatibility, because if you have someone who's thoroughly invested in Microsoft Office, it is not going to be a good replacement. Short version. Personally, honestly, the versions I don't generically recommend LibreOffice. I usually recommend only Office, or I might recommend WPS Office, which has honestly better compatibility with Microsoft stuff. Or if you want to go again with the proprietary end, you can look at SoftMaker Office or Free Office or whatever they're calling it at the moment. It's free as in price, not as in like, liberties and all the other nonsense. But if you're looking for compatibility, and compatibility is a must, those three options will tend to be better than LibreOffice. I'm not saying LibreOffice is bad. I'm just saying, depending how deep the rabbit hole you need to go for Microsoft Office compatibility, that is a caveat. Because a lot of the times the formatting is going to be a little weird, because specifically what happens is some Linux distros default to text that like MS Office isn't going to detect, or, so the formatting is going to be off, or there's images and stuff that LibreOffice can't interpret, or there's macros that are being used. Like there's so many caveats to it, but generically most end users would be perfectly fine with LibreOffice. So I'm not going to bash the recommendation. I might disagree with the choice, but it's a caveat depending on how deep down the Microsoft the Microsoft Office compatibility rabbit hole you need to go. So that's just my take personally, though.
It is in the package manager. To find it, you just type in LibreOffice. If I can type. And you can download and install right through here. And I'll show you an example of LibreOffice Writer, which is like Microsoft Word. Opens up, and it's a fairly simple, easy to use word processing app. And it's also compatible with Microsoft Office files. You can also find programs such as Spotify or Google Chrome. I use Google Chrome myself. If Linux came with Firefox, I used to use Firefox, but nothing against it. Just type in what you're looking for. And you'll find it. So one program I would like to draw a little bit of attention to is the Manjaro Boot Splash Manager, When you shut down your PC or start up your PC, you're usually presented with a black screen with text while Linux starts. Something similar to this image here. Not quite, but pretty similar to something like this or this. So, while it may be useful being able to see the text if you're having an issue booting up, and it will help you diagnosing your issue, but the option is there to cover it up if you're looking for something a little more clean. It's easy to use. Just open up your package manager, search for bootsplash-manager, and download. To download, just click the download button, click apply, enter your password, and it will download.
So this is where you are correct. There's other ways to do it. There's the login stuff for like Plasma that you can use, and there's a bunch of different ways to mess around with the boot splash stuff. But the way you're talking about, it's actually probably the best way.
Apply. Transaction successfully finished. Perfect. With the Boot Splash Manager installed, just type in Boot Splash Manager and open it up. It's easy to use. To download a Boot Splash, you can press the download button, select a Boot Splash that you would like. I already have Manjaro downloaded, but you can do vendor or XFCE or Manjaro glitch. Click install. Click yes. Enter your password again. Installing. This may take a few minutes, so I will just fast forward. All right. With that installed, you can close this. And then to try it out before you apply it, you can click on what you want to try and click the play button, and you'll get a preview of your boot splash. So when you're booting up your computer, this is what you're going to see.
So again, this is something that's built into Plasma. So if you go into I believe if you go into settings, just go up to the search bar and type in splash screen or splash, and it'll bring you to basically do the same thing. It's just integrated into the system. It's under the system, like I said, it's under the system setting app. Again, the way you're doing is perfectly fine. It's built for Manjaro, so I totally get why this is the preferred way to do it. I'm just saying that it's built into KDE Plasma as well. So either way, it works perfectly fine. It's all from the GUI. It's no CLI stuff needed. So this is probably the more simplified way. But if you also want to download stuff that kdelook.org, I believe, is the website, or I can't remember the exact website it pulls from. You can also get other boot splash screens from there as well, because again, it's built into Plasma. But that's if you're using the Plasma version, so to each their own.
I like the plain Manjaro one myself, and that's what I'm going to go with. And if you want to delete the ones that you don't use, just click on it and click delete. Once you found a boot splash that you want to apply, just click apply, and you are done. All right, the last thing I want to run through is Steam. We want to enable Proton so games will work on Linux. While there are some games on Steam that don't require it because they run natively on Linux, most games actually do need it. And to enable, open up Steam. At the top left corner, click Steam, Settings. On the left side, select Steam Play and enable Steam Play and Steam Play for other titles. Here you can select what Proton to run. I have the community version here and here, but I found that for the most part, experimental works just fine.
So if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. Just speaking from experience, and I'm not running Manjaro, I'm running Garuda when it comes to this stuff. And I was running test versions of Ubuntu Budgie for 2204, testing out their gaming stuff. when you go into this and you want to use like the Glorious Egg Roll version like you were using, it does, and you enable it for all titles. It only works, I believe, from what I've seen anyway, every time I use it, is the Steam built-in version of Proton, not like the Glorious Egg Roll or any of the other versions. But it will, if you click enable for all titles, it will work only with the Steam versions of Proton. I could be wrong. I'm just saying that's my experience, because every time I enable it for Glorious Egg Roll, it doesn't matter the version, never works. It always boots it. That box always ends up unchecked, and I have to go through every single game, right click on it, tell it to use what version, and it's kind of annoying. But yes, for the most part, Proton Experimental is definitely probably the best way to go if you don't want to go down the rabbit hole of managing Proton by yourself, per se.
Select OK, and Steam will have to restart. Restart Steam. Once Steam is started, you will be able to go in and download and play whatever game you want. If you're curious if your game is going to work on Linux, there is a website called ProtonDB. On ProtonDB, you can search for the game that you want to play. For example, we'll just type in Call of Duty, and then there'll be a rating for each game. So Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is silver rating. If we click on it, it'll also come up with comments that people have put down. Runs just like Windows, was able to play the campaign without problems. Works pretty well. So if you're curious to see what games work, I recommend ProtonDB.
ProtonDB, great website. It at least gives you an indication of how a game runs. Those ratings, pay attention to the arrows up or down. There are some games that, despite the rating, will not work without a lot of headaches. One game I can think of right off the top of my head is Resident Evil Revelations. And then you have to go, this is when you start getting into the weeds a little more. You have to go and install things like, through Proton tricks, you end up having to go and install, WMP11 and just a bunch of headaches that most gamers aren't going to want to deal with just to get a game to work. Because then you have to know like wine prefixes and all this other stuff. Beyond DLLs, if you've been down that rabbit hole on Windows, take that, and that's pretty much what a lot of this stuff on Linux is. So my recommendation when you're looking at ProtonDB, see if it's a Steam play or a Tinkerer's report, because there's a vast difference between the two. Steam play, generically, you can call it stable, you can call it whatever you want. The Tinkerer reports, well, great, but those are usually the guys who will have, they'll use Glorious Egg Roll, but they're willing to tinker with stuff. The people who generically just use the Steam play stuff, they just want to play games. That's the majority of gamers. So I tend to say I love ProtonDB, but caveat its usefulness, because as an example, one of the games I love to play is Bayonetta. If you install that to an NTFS external drive or a secondary drive at all, that's NTFS, it will not work. So you have to rip the entire game directory and put it on your ext4 drive, because Proton doesn't know how to generically interpret that sometimes. And it's really, really kind of annoying, but you wouldn't find that out unless you went to ProtonDB. But you have to be willing to do the research for that. So it's one of those, great site, great for troubleshooting, but it's also one of those sites that we tend to point users to when troubleshooting, a game and it's rated gold, but there's like all these lists of caveats that most gamers aren't going to go through, is a problem. So when you see that little filter button up there, filter to Steam play only if you're a normal gamer, because you don't want the Tinkerer reports, generically speaking, because normal people want to click the big blue install button and the big green play button. Just my take, my recommendation. lowest level common denominator, call it what you want, but that's generically what that's the whole vibe of console gaming. I just drop it in a disc or I hit download and it just does its thing. That's what most gamers want. Again, my take. Not every Linux gamer is going to be like me in that regard.
The other thing too is some games will also have, like Skyrim, the audio was broken, but this guy found a fix just by pasting this into the launch options for the game. And it looks like he also created his own YouTube video for a guide. Another thing a lot of people suggest using Proton GE, which is the glorious aggro community version of Proton. And to download something like that is incredibly easy too. Again, I just go into the package manager, download the Proton Community Updater. Download that. Once you have it downloaded and installed.
So I'm going to give you one better. There's one called Proton Up/Qt. And I'll tell you why, but I'll let you finish your point. The community updater is a script and it does help tremendously with updating Proton or getting the other versions of Proton that are available. I will leave it at that for now.
Open it up by buying the Proton Community Updater. Open it up. And then you can just select what you want to install or remove and click OK. All right. Very last thing I want to talk about is I had some issues getting my Xbox One controller to work well.
Okay, so the reason I'm going to recommend Proton Up Qt over the community updater is simply if you game outside of Steam. If you have the Epic Game Store, I'm going to recommend the Heroic Game Launcher. There's a reason for this. The Heroic Game Launcher now enables it so you can use the Epic Game Store on Linux, and you can download and manage within app the particular versions of Wine that you want it to use. Wine is the software that Proton is based off from. Proton Up allows you to use different stuff, so you can use like a Lutris version, which Lutris is a game launcher, a game hub launcher, I guess is probably the best way to describe it, because you can pull in things like Uplay, you can pull in things like GOG, you can pull in things like insert, 9,000 other community, 9,000 other launchers that are available into Lutris and install them, like Origin as an example. The one thing that I use Origin for is for one game, but you can go to and install Lutris and tell it to use this particular version of Proton, or this version of the Lutris version of Proton, or this particular, you can granularly control it a bit more. So what Proton Up does is it detects like a heroic launcher, and it will download those particular versions. So, and it installs it directly into that directory. So if you want to change the version in heroic to something that is different, so if you want to use a Proton version or a Lutris version, you can totally do that, and it doesn't care. And it also detects if like you have Steam installed, and it will download, it'll give you a long list of stuff to download for particular version of Proton. So if you want the GE versions, totally will give you that. That is probably the best app thus far for managing across the board Wine and Proton with Linux if you're using multiple game launchers. Personally, for me, to cover the gamut of Linux, most PC gamers, you want to cover most stores. So you already talked about Steam. Heroic is for EGS, for Epic Game Store. If you are looking for a Linux native client to manage your GOG games, I'm going to recommend Mini Galaxy. Mini Galaxy is a front end that allows you to download all your games, and it uses all that stuff that you can use. And it covers probably 90% of most gaming. If you're going to use things like Bethesda, the Bethesda launcher, or I guess the Microsoft store, I don't know anymore. Or if you're going to use like Rockstar for any of the GTA stuff or any of that kind of stuff, like specifically to that, I would recommend Lutris. I generically don't recommend Lutris specifically because it brings in potentially too many points of entry of failure. Like, as an example, on Garuda, when I launch Origin and I launch a game, like one game that I particularly play a lot of is Syndicate 2012. When I launch it and I say Alt Tab through it, in the Alt Tab, it shows up as 7 versions or 7 active windows for Origin. It's a bug because it doesn't happen on Budgie, which is the desktop for Ubuntu Budgie that I was using. But it's stuff like that where it's like, doesn't give the best presentation sometimes. And it's not a knock on Lutris. It's just, again, too many points of failure. And sometimes waiting for scripts is not something that a lot of people want to do. And sometimes it can take a long time. That's just what it is. So if you're running something that isn't popular, I might not see any updates for a while. Just saying. These are caveats. These are things to keep in mind when making recommendations. That's all.
Wirelessly. If I plugged in the USB cable, it worked just fine. But I have a USB dongle for my controller to work wirelessly with my desktop computer. So I found that was not working, and I found that there was a program called XOW. I tried with the package manager first, and that did not work. So we're going to have to do it a little bit harder of a way, and this is kind of what I've been trying to avoid with Linux, is because it requires a terminal. Thankfully, it's fairly straightforward. Just Google search XOW. There will be a GitHub link, and for those who need a little bit extra help like me, just underneath it, there's a website called Addictive Tips, and they have a really excellent guide written up on how to install and download it, or download and install it. So we'll just copy this link, open up our console, and I'll paste.
So this right here is the epitome of the shit that I hate. And this is a knock on the user. So I want to make that clear. This is not a knock on the user. This is a knock on the documentation. I hate this way of doing stuff. We tell users not to copy and paste random commands from the internet into the terminal. What is this person doing? And I'm, again, not knocking the person. He's copying, pasting commands, random commands for the internet into the terminal. We talk security and all the other stuff and trying to break users of habits, but we encourage it. This is more towards the Linux community as a whole. So, wireless controller. I use a PS4 controller, so I can't really say much. So, I'm harping on this way of doing stuff. This way is crap. Because, like he said, it's a little bit harder and he wanted to avoid it. And he shouldn't have to do this. Again, this is a crap way of user interaction with the system. Again, this is, personal preference, call it whatever you want. But we talk about making Linux a great gaming platform. Doing shit like this does not make it a great gaming platform from time to time. We have to understand, when we talk plug and play, actually mean it. Don't oversell and underdeliver. If somebody has a wireless controller and they, plug in the dongle for the wireless controller and it doesn't work, they're going to have a crappy experience and have a crappy take on what it's like to game on Linux. Now, as far as plugging in the hardwire USB into the Xbox One controller and it working, Yes, that is built into the kernel. So generically, I play wired. I have too many headaches when it comes to wireless controllers in general on any OS. Don't even get me started on Windows. Don't get me started on Mac OS. The fact that it works on Linux is awesome, but I think this, while working for you, I'm assuming, as I haven't listened to the rest of this, I still say this is a crap user experience to do this to a user looking to switch.
Paste that in. It'll download. Then, all right. I'm just going to copy and paste everything in. So make, build, release. Paste that one in. Okay. Sudo make install. So I'll copy that and paste that in. Type in your password. One thing people do suggest is try to be careful when you're copying and pasting stuff into your console. Only copy and paste things that you actually trust. So I'll just copy and paste that.
So what he's copying and pasting at the moment, the sudo systems CTL enable service is for what we call systemd. It's the init system that initializes a lot of the system protocols and all the other stuff. Like there's a whole explanation and a whole lot of I hate systemd crap and some of the other idiots in the community. But really, at the end of the day, this is what he's doing, and this just enables systemd stuff to, work. So like his Xbox controller. So the next time he reboots, all this stuff will be working.
That. Enable. And try that. Do that. All right. So, moment of truth. Let's just see if my controller pairs up. And it connected. Let's see, is there a controller? Game controller. Nothing. Oh, it's my keyboard. Box one. There we go. The controller works. I am wireless. No issues. That was fairly easy. I was trying to avoid having to use the console or the terminal for installing programs. I'm not very familiar with it myself, so I was hoping to avoid it, but that was fairly straightforward. I did find this guide on addictivetips.com. That was really easy to follow along. I read it before I made the video, so I had a pretty good idea what to do. Yeah. So that's mostly it for me. Thank you for watching. I'm probably going to make a few videos of just trying to get games playing for this, but for the most part, thank you for watching. If I helped you, great. If there's something you need help with, leave a comment and maybe I can help you, or maybe someone else can help you, but never hurts to ask for help. Thank you, and see you next time.
So overall, I have no complaints as far as the user's research, the user being willing to do some Google foo or insert service provider here. The only issue I, again, really took issue with was more or less just the experience for a new user to have to use the terminal to get a controller to work. That's kind of a garbage first impression there. Not gonna lie. Some people might like that take, some people might not. Don't really care. I'm more of I look at it from more of the user perspective and the user interaction point of view. You want the best out of the box experience. Throwing random commands into the terminal when we tell users not to does not make the best user experience. But at the end of the day, Homeboy is doing his research. He's, willingly trying it in a good way without trying to, come off as superior or coming across as a fucking chode. Like some of the people I've done reactions to are like, they've tried Linux, and really at the end of the day, this is the stuff I like reacting to, because it's people like actually trying it and going through the steps of actually learning it and trying it and just living in it and making their recommendations based off what they've seen and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then once you get into it, you know, like different recommendations for software and that kind of stuff. It's a very, very different type of interaction that I have with this kind of person as opposed to the mind-numbing, ulcer-inducing dumb that people spew as fact. So there you go. There's a reaction video. Props to you. I plan on watching some more, see where this goes. So keep on rocking, dude. I'll catch you guys on the flip. Peace.